Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the HuntBetter Podcast. Today, we're hanging out with one of my favorite guys in the world of hunting, Mr. Jared Scheffler of Whitetail Adrenaline. And man, when it comes to chasing animals down, when it comes to bows and arrows, and really just that primitive style of hunting, Jared really is one of the great culture keepers within the sport of hunting. Anytime I chat with Jared on the phone or over text, we never discuss strategy or anything like that. It's always this, more of this philosophical type conversation where he helps me stop overthinking everything. And he's helped me learn to trust my gut. He's helped me become a better instinctual archer. He's like my personal hunting sage. He's very wise and helps me think, but warns me to not overthink, if that makes sense. Anywho, all that said, this episode is going to be a little different than what you're probably expecting. But I think content like this that goes beyond mere strategies and tactics is really needed in the hunting world today. And I think it's crucial as we try to preserve the culture of hunting and the art of woodsmanship. So rather than tips and tricks, you're going to hear us talk more about the instinctual side of hunting, more about the mental side of things, and the philosophy of developing this inner compass of woodsmanship that can actually help you become way more successful in the field. And more importantly, we hope this conversation helps you enjoy the sport of hunting in a new and refreshing way, and to appreciate this way of life that many of us belong to. Also, we got special guest and my good friend Andy May joining us for the first little bit, as him and Jared actually go a good ways back, and it was super fun hearing them catch up and talk shop together. So again, thanks for being here. Let's go ahead and jump into the podcast. So along with Jared Scheffler, I figured I'd bring Andy May. These are the two guys in my life that text me all the time asking for hunting advice. So I was like, why don't you guys just come on the show and we'll just talk about it all together. So thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks for having us.
How did you guys meet? I don't know this story.
We met years ago at one of the Michigan shows.
Was it Lansing?
That was Lansing. Yeah, we have a mutual friend, Tom, and
that's right, Tom, who used to work at Shootbox. Yeah, that's right. Yep.
That's right. He was my bow technician, and I went to his little shop, and one of Jared's Whitetail Adrenaline videos was on, and I was like, man, I love these videos, man. They're like my favorite thing to watch. And he's like, I know those guys. And I was like, no, you don't. And he's like, yeah, man, they've stayed with me here like a couple times, and we've shot together. I was like, no kidding. He's like, they're coming to the Michigan show. You should come up and hang out. So I went up there for the day, and yeah, man, it was awesome meeting them. And shoot, we've kept in touch ever since. We, text each other here and there, and I'll ask him some advice on things on Kansas and broadheads and weather and all this stuff. And it's cool. We bounce some ideas off each other, and it's been a great friendship.
Yeah, for sure. No, I knew, I was pretty sure it was Lansing, but I forgot about that connection with Tom. We, back in the day when we used to do that show, yeah, we'd crash at his house after the show. Generally, the next show was in Ohio, so we'd spend like 2-3 days there. The first show I actually did that was a 3-day show. I did a small like county fair one the summer before, but it was Lansing, Michigan.
I've listened to a lot of podcasts with you, Jared, and something happened with your job. You lost your job, and then you're like, you know what? I'm going to go home. And then you found yourself editing for like 16 hours or something. And I know what it's like to get in that editing, trance. And I mean, take us from there. I mean, from that day when you kind of got locked in with editing to now, I mean, did you ever in your wildest dreams see it becoming this?
No, not this far. But yeah, I worked in a factory night shift and got fired on an overtime night, if you can imagine that. Got let go, I guess you'd say. Of course, I didn't feel like I did anything wrong. I was ready to be done with it anyways. My cousin Jim and I, we had filmed the footage for our first video the fall before. And we just went into it like, we're going to have fun with this. Whatever it is. We're not even sure we're going to produce something. We kind of had an idea on it a little bit. And I got let go in March of 2008 and got back to my house around, it was around midnight, I think, when I got back. And I immediately I was like, well, maybe this is what I need to do, is produce this video. And I started editing that. And I remember I was in an upstairs room of an old house, and I edited all the way through that night, all the way through the next day till it was dark, and realized I hadn't even got up for a glass of water yet. I was just zoned in, and I think that was 44 or 45 days it took me to edit that first one. And I had done some editing, just short little stuff, but never actually a full like feature of any sort. So it was all learning a lot of stuff. And I was working on a computer I bought for like $1,500 way back in 2004. And that's how it all got kicked off. So, and that was that first video, that was a by permission and public. The next year is when we launched the all public land season, which it's been that way ever since. Our new stuff that'll be coming out, that's the uncuffed, mostly public with a little bit of door knocking. So.
Yeah. So like when you're sitting down making this video, you're doing the edits, 45 days go by. At what point between, then and now were you like, hey, this thing's got some legs on it. Like, I think we can make a living doing this.
Oh, that didn't come for a little while. I was around $35,000 in debt without a job, and I never really wanted to do the sponsored approach. And so a buddy of mine had just some fill-in work I could do. All these houses were getting repossessed, and so he'd get contracts from banks to go in, change locks, clean out. It was a nasty job, really. And I kind of picked up some cash on the side doing that, and then edited. I did that for a couple years. I worked on my uncle. I went back and worked on my uncle's farm, just trying to pick up just a little bit of coin. And then it was in 2010. Actually, I think it was the spring of 2011. And I realized it was such a big project compared to the other three that I'd done before it. I was like, there's no way I'm going to get this video done if I don't quit helping my uncle on the farm, which, is a little dairy farm. It was just trying to pick up a little bit of cash. And so I just, cut my losses on that and went all in. And I tell you, it always has been quite a bit of scraping by along. The sponsor-free road, that ain't an easy one. It ain't easy either way. It's a tough road. People really started to like it, and we have an amazing support base. I can't thank them enough. It's been quite a special ride. This show season, I really seen how much it moved people, the videos, just talking to them, and that was really special for me. So.
Yeah, I think that's what's so different about you guys. Andy introduced me to Whitetail Adrenaline, and I was like, who the heck are these guys? Like, these guys are crazy. It was incredible, man. And so, like, I know you grew up on a farm, and a theme that we kind of see that we've talked about here at HuntBetter for a few weeks is this pattern that I've noticed with guys who are really successful hunters that are really influential that I look up to, is that nobody really taught them to hunt per se. They maybe have picked up advice from people, but there was no, hey, you're going to hunt like this, and then have to break a lot of bad habits. Did you kind of have that growing up on the farm?
No, I actually gathered quite a bit from my dad. Not so much in the stalking of whitetails with a bow, but more like tracking deer, which I haven't had a lot of that on my videos. Most of the places I hunt, I run on a ground. Where I grew up, you could pretty much hunt everybody's ground around there, and then a big public land swamp, and it was Wisconsin. So I learned quite a bit about that. And just my dad had a pretty aggressive style. When he'd take me out bow hunting, he'd just point to a tree and be like, you think you can get up on that branch or in that crotch of that tree? And I'm like, I was kind of a squirrel back then. And so, yeah, I'd shimmy up there. And that's how I did most of my hunting. I remember my dad getting on the ground once in a while, just telling stories, but he had a very aggressive approach. It was very rarely was he going back to the same place unless he actually seen something, which I didn't really think on that until later in life. But there was probably some things that instilled there a little bit, like don't give a spot too much time unless you've got a good reason to, I guess, visually. So,
mm-hmm. Andy, when you watched Whitetail Adrenaline for the first time, what was it that kind of drew you in that was totally different than anything else that you could be watching out there?
Man, I remember that first video, and Jared, you probably look back at that and think it's awful, but when it came out, it was just so cool. Like one thing, just the interaction between you and and Jim, and your guys' humor and kind of picking at each other was just so fun. And it reminded me of like me and my buddies. And then just that, that aggressive approach of on the ground in your face that kind of, transpired over the next few videos. I mean, it's just, the name is perfect. Whitetail Adrenaline, right? It's like so action packed, adrenaline filled. And man, I just love your story. I gotta say, like, you mentioned that your fans and your audience, they're so willing to support you, and your story of the sacrifices that you made to do this and to follow your dream when you're scraping by. I mean, I can just see you like editing and eating peanut butter and jellies and ramen noodles and trying to scrape by and just never losing that focus on that dream. And man, you guys created something that's such a one of a kind. It makes me want to support you. Like, I don't care what your DVDs cost. I want to support you. I mean, not only as a friend, but just like I respect what you did. It's an awesome story, and the whole DIY thing that anybody can do. It's super inspiring. And on top of that, like I've thought about this a lot. I don't think there's anyone alive like that is as unique of a hunter as you. You remind me, and I know you love to study the history of bow hunting and the history of the Native Americans, and you exhibit that. Like you could tell that that's in your soul because that's how you hunt. I think you're the most unique hunter of our time, and your skill and your just devotion to the kind of that on the ground with the stick bow is just, it's super inspiring, man. I mean, I love watching it. It inspires me it inspired me years ago to get out of my comfort zone and hunt on the ground and try that. Like, cause I also feel like I'm a student of the bow hunting game. And when I was a pretty accomplished bow hunter when I came across your stuff, but I saw you doing some of that stuff and I was like, I don't have that ability yet, but that it inspired me to like, I want to learn to do that. Like Jared, that's a skill that I don't have. And I've always taken it very seriously. I want to like expand my kill set. I have no interest in just, gaining a big wall full of big bucks, all taken the same way. Like I take pride in trying to expand that skill set and learning new tactics. And man, you inspired me to get on the ground and get good at that stalking game and the glassing game and the patience and that high intensity in your face hunting. So man, I want to thank you, and I'm just super proud of you, buddy.
I appreciate it.
Just hearing your story and seeing where you started and where you've arrived is, man, it's inspiring, and I'm super proud of you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's that's how I love to hunt. It's, you said it fits the name Whitetail Adrenaline. The funny thing is it didn't even dawn on me until, I don't know, sometime this last year. I'm like, that name just popped into my head while I was working at the factory about 2 years before. And I was like, wow, that's the one. I don't have to write that one down. And I just liked it, but I didn't ever hunt to fulfill that name. And that was kind of, I thought about that sometime in the last year. I was like, wow, it does fit really well. So that was pretty unique, but I think that's part of like, I think when we sat down, my cousin and I, we talked about some different things. We wanted to keep it authentic, real, show the failures, show it all. I knew that by showing people the failures, by default, it's gonna for one be very authentic, but it's also gonna push me in a way to get better. It was a principle that I believed in, and I also liked the concept of it, just capturing it on the fly. And I think back in that era, you'd see a lot of like the hunts, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the production, but I didn't see one out there doing that. And I really liked that. A lot of times they'd go to the hunt and then it'd come back to like a studio setting, and it was cool. I appreciated those types of productions. I just wasn't really quite. I really wanted to just tell the story completely the way it unfolded, which is very challenging to edit because there is no script to it. So like as you're editing this mountain of footage, you're carving stories out and giving it flow, and it's a different type of production to edit, no doubt. So yeah, the ground hunting, I just absolutely love it. But I the one thing about it is that's how I like to hunt, and it might not be for everybody. And of course I wanted to show people that. And I love what you said, Andy, there about it kind of pushed you in a way, and not even necessarily like, hey, I want to do it exactly, but pushes a person to maximize themselves within whatever they're doing. And I love that the way you kind of broke that down a little bit, because I don't really look at comparing. I really don't like comparing to somebody else. Just what can I do, or what could I have done better? And one thing about hunting animals on the ground is it's like the second you get your visual, it's a whole new deal. You got to engineer a plan in your head that you think is going to work for every scenario, and everyone's different, and that's why it's very hard to describe, oh, this is exactly what I do in this scenario, just us talking here, because there's so many micro details, and you make one little mistake and it's over. And if the guy behind you running the camera, if he makes one little mistake, it's over. Especially when you're dealing with mature bucks, they tolerate obviously a lot less. So, that enters a whole new set of challenges. But I'll quit talking now.
No, it's great, man.
I got a question for you while I have your ear. It's something that I found very interesting, and I'm sure the listeners will too. But I don't know if you remember this, but I asked you, it's probably a couple years ago now, but you have a unique theory on cold fronts, that kind of differs from a lot of what, we've read and learned. And we talked about that a little bit. Will you dive into that a little bit? Because you've been on video saying how you hate cold fronts in a way.
Yeah, I do. But keep in mind, I also, over the last several years, have focused a lot more on open country.
Sure.
Which that can differ. Kevin Vistison, he brought up the point a few years ago, like in Michigan in October, you get those cold fronts and they'll drop certain leaves. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I started kind of just playing things back in my head. I'm like, gosh, I just see so many more deer right when the warm front kicks in. I mean, it's night and day out in that open country anyways. And it's like I'd get all excited for the cold front all the time because it's kind of ingrained in your system. Like I grew up in Wisconsin in the woods and stuff. And even then I remember, I haven't done as much of that stuff since I kind of saw this, although I have had reports from people in Wisconsin that have seen similar things. I don't want to speak too much because I don't think it applies to everywhere on that, but definitely what I've seen in the open country, and that's across many, many states, is if a cold front's coming in, I'm like, all right, when's the first warm front sunny day coming? Because it's always going to be better visually, spotting, getting eyes on things. I mean, I'm still going to be out there. And then, the other thing I look at a lot of times is how windy it is through the night. Because, you get those it gets 15, 20 mile an hour winds before the sun cracks, through part of that night. And they're pretty much always bedded too. You know how it is though. I mean, with a cold front comes a lot of other variables, sometimes it's, generally you get decent amounts of wind. And so there's a lot of factors to play into that. I don't want to because I haven't hunted everywhere. And I know that there's several hunters that find cold fronts very good, and especially in October in some of those states. So I can only run theories as to what may cause that. And I can really only talk highly on the open country stuff that I've, and my guys, they laughed at me too. I shouldn't say my guys. I mean, they're not my guys, but the guys that are part of the crew. I mean, they laughed kind of the first time. The only one that didn't was Chansey. He's like, I think, well, yeah, we got it on video and it's part of the video too. He's like, cold front, I don't see anything. I'm seeing good bucks, cold front, cut, boom, they're gone. Where'd they go? And he gets fired up and everything. But, a couple of the other guys, they laughed at me, but I was like, watch it this fall, just watch it and monitor it. And you tell me what you see. And they can't deny it either, at least in that open country. So yeah, that's what we've seen. We're still out there in the cold days, and December is a different deal, post rut, that's a whole different animal.
Yeah. So. I think you made a good point too. I think a lot of hunters miss keying in on what's leading up to certain days. Like you talked about it being windy, possibly high winds throughout the night. And that might lead to, if there's a calming in that wind on the next day, that might lead to some increased movement. And like sometimes too, like, you get a lot of stagnant weather for like days on end, whether that's warm, a warm front, and then you get that, that little drop in temperature, that 15 degrees, and it's like, boom, they're everywhere. Or I've seen it the other way where it's just cold, just brutal. And, the movement really shuts down. And then you get this like warm, sunny bluebird day, everything starts melting and the deer are out like crazy. Those time frames, kind of like in the past, like what's already happened. And that's kind of helped me predict like what the good days are going to be, instead of just looking at, tomorrow's weather is this. Those preceding conditions can really play a big role.
Yeah. I think my theory on why they're, and it doesn't go for all deer, but definitely I won't see nearly as many deer at first light on those windy, is I haven't really seen where they see all that great at night. They can obviously see, but so they're already losing some sense in their eyesight, and then they lose their hearing a lot with that high wind. And then, along with not being able to see that great at night, because I can definitely get away with a lot more. You can kind of see them, make them out, and I can get away with like you'd never get away with that in the daylight. So they definitely have a hindrance there. But then, already being night, but then you get wind and you got all kinds of movement. It reduces their ability to see even further. And then with those high winds, sometimes different terrain ways, it's harder for them to actually use their sense of smell, depending on all of that. So now they're hindered again, and they can't hear very good because there's grass blowing. So they're completely I'll just lay down because I've been robbed of a bulk of my senses. And I believe that's why I see that. So normally I wait. I'm out there, but I know that the movement's going to probably pick up about 2 hours into the morning once they get their sense of sight back and all of that. And that's generally what I see anyways. It doesn't always apply, but I pretty much figure a mid to late morning movement on those nights.
I'm curious if you've ever like went back through your kills and looked at the data of like how many you've killed that were, below normal temperatures, or how many you killed like around normal or even above. Cause I've actually done that. I've killed a lot of bucks, and I was curious, did most of my kills occur with temperatures below normal? That's kind of what I was expecting, especially because, I hunt when I can, I have limited time, but certainly if I know the temperatures are favorable, I try to get out there. But I was really surprised how even it was. I've killed, I don't remember the exact numbers, and this was a few years ago, and it may have slightly changed, but I had killed very equal amounts, like above normal temperatures, below normal temperatures, and then kind of right in the middle at normal.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I wouldn't be able to do that because I never kept a diary. So I never kept a diary. Well, way back, like 20 years ago, I kind of did. But that doesn't surprise me at all. In fact, I mean, coming out in the next set, Matty Z that was filming with me, he had been in Kansas. This happened to be Kansas for a week. And it warmed up to 60 degrees, and it was, I think, around November 15th, somewhere in there. That's not untypical. I mean, it was the best day that he had seen. And I had two guys. One, we were eating the night before at a bar or whatever, and this one hunter, we just got chit-chatting a little bit, and he says, well, it's warming up tomorrow. I'm going back. These deer are going to be not moving. And a guy where I went and bought a case of beer said the same thing. And I don't even say nothing. I just kind of chuckle because at least in that part of the country, I'm like, great, but yeah, that was the best day. And then there was a warm day before Matty got there that was both them days were the best days I've seen out there. I've seen good activity on cold days too, but I've seen it shut them down a lot of times too, especially super harsh during the rut. I've really seen that quite often too. And even some reports that I've had from guys watching it the last few years in Wisconsin, more during the rut, they've watched it just shut them right down. Now that you need to get enough concrete, you need a lot of reports. You can't get just 2-3 and then be like, oh, that's the way it is. You got to get a good amount of variety in there which I wouldn't say that there's enough data points on that, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me. So yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff, man. Another thing too, that I loved we talked about arrows, arrow weight, broadhead design and broadhead choices between the two of us. And, you and I, we kind of fall on different ends of the spectrum. But I really appreciated your, opinion on this. And I think it's super valuable because you kind of made a point that I didn't really ever think of, but like, I have like a very precision mindset. You said you used to, yeah. I'm all about like accuracy and pinpoint accuracy. And I practice like long range. I take a lot of time, like tuning my arrows and my bow to get the most forgiving setup possible. I'm practicing out, 80, 100 yards, trying to shoot these little tiny groups. And that's what boosts my confidence. Right. And, I've always been a mechanical first guy. I shoot a lot of deer with fixed heads too when I'm ground hunting. But I've always been kind of more of on the mechanical side because it is a more forgiving setup at range in windy conditions. If I make an error, if I apply a little too much thumb pressure on the shot or a downward angle where my form isn't perfect, it's a little more forgiving. But when I asked you about that, I loved your theory on it. And you mentioned how, you do favor that really heavy arrow with a big fixed blade. And I loved how you put, you could have like a 2-inch mechanical and you think, man, at 2 inches a cut. But if you only get, 8 inches of penetration or 10 or whatever with that big 2-inch mechanical, I mean, that's good. And maybe that deer's dead. But, with your setup, it's like maybe yours is, I know you do use a big one, but even just a normal fixed head, say 1.25 inches or, 1.5 inches would be a pretty big one. You think that 1.5 inch cut, but what you're not really taking into account is like all that cut pushing through the entire animal, whether it's a frontal shot and you're getting the full length of the animal exiting out the rear or, a steep quartering away shot. So can you touch on your thoughts on that a little bit and why you choose to use such a heavy arrow and all your buddies on the show are using a heavy arrow with that big fixed head broadhead? Yeah.
My thoughts on if I'm going to build an arrow, I want it to be, if my arrow connects with that animal anywhere, I want it to be the deadliest it could possibly be outside of running poison tipped arrows. Right. But just I want it to be no matter where it hits that animal. And then I'm going to try to make that as accurate as I can from there. That's how I try to go about it. Now, long range shooting, I totally get it. And those are more controlled settings. If you're going to be shooting deer at 60, 70, 80, 100 yards, well, you're probably going to be able to, it's comfortable enough. You can wait for that broadside angle, and now you got your precision for that. That makes sense. And I know a lot of guys that do that. But they're smart hunters that are shooting those setups. They're going to wait. They know the limitations with that equipment. Now, if you're hunting them on the ground, even at that range, a lot of times those situations are going to be pretty controlled. In the earlier videos, I shot several, 15 years ago at 60 plus yards back then. And those were, we were on the ground, but more controlled, had the time, could wait for them to get broadside, draw, I was a controlled process shooter. That's what I was, or what is known today as control. I call it conscious control, but nonetheless, very good at yielding accuracy. But I saw scenarios that started to play out where, especially you start pushing, these situations on the ground, you start getting in 25, 30, 35 yards, high intensity situations. And I noticed it got really hard to read the reaction. How much is this animal going to react? Because I've seen high tense whitetails drop what looks to be 14, pushing 16 inches at 35 yards. And I've seen them drop 2 inches, fully intense, both animals. And I was like, that's a variable I can't control. And that drove me crazy. So I think an archer should always strive to be the most accurate they can be. But I was like, I got to start to look at other factors than just that, because that's a variable that I'll never be able to completely control. And then you go down the road of high intensity situations, especially when you start dealing with 4, 5, 6-year-old animals. They don't tolerate as much as a 2-year-old sitting there hanging out. So the last thing I want to have is any anxiety come through me about, oh, my arrow can't hit that. I want to kill that. I don't want that anxiety to be there whatsoever. I don't even want to have to think about it. It's like, boom, I got a second, and who cares if I hit the shoulder or not? And so I try to push that threshold. The ultimate goal is to fully penetrate the animal. And once that's easily happening, then my theory is go bigger at that point. So, and I don't go, this is the first year, this last fall, I set up Chansey and Tanner's setups completely, arrows and the broadheads. And I set them up with a 1.5 inch cut. And I'm glad I did, because there was scenarios where, what I'm running, or what I ran this last year, is a 1.8 inch cut out of my longbow, but that's 860 grains. And that arrow is 5% less arrow force than a 70-pound compound shooting that arrow. So I'm basically, my arrow has more force than their arrow actually does. So I went bigger with that one. Now I wouldn't recommend that to hardly any traditional archer, just because 50 pounds and 28 inch draw, that unless you're shooting fawns, I wouldn't recommend that big for when you hit bone. But, Chansey, he had a probably 260 pound, right around there. I call the deer Arnold Schwarzenegger because he's a big, big deer, big bodied, and he hit it right in the knuckle, 1/4 in 2. And Chansey's convinced that he wouldn't have got that deer with pretty much anything else or close to it, something along those lines. There's quite a few good broadheads out there today. But his setup's 550 total arrow weight. We got to have some trajectory in there for those guys. Tanner's a short draw. He's 500 grains, but very stiff arrows, 240 at 26 inch cut. I stiffen that way up too, because I do like that when it hits, by the specs of the bow. Yeah, it should be probably like a 320, but or right around there, 330, but I like to go as stiff as you can and still get the arrow. And he can throw a 125 point on that and shoot a bullet hole with no fletchings through the paper, or a 200 and a 315 if he wanted to strap one of those on there. It's slightly point low, the same arrow. So, we got that set up pretty good. But anyways, that's quite a bit about that. I hope that, I guess.
Yeah.
Some
that's
people
great.
freak out, why is he shooting it that heavy? Well, the last 2 I killed were inside of 5 yards. Give me a 1,500 grain arrow at that yard. It doesn't matter. Close enough range. I literally have an arrow that's 1,200 grains, and I didn't have that one in my quiver last year, but I would have if I had it ready to go. But hell yeah, I would have sent that arrow on both of them because at that range, I mean, yeah, especially, we had this on 2 scenarios last year. Hit weeds the size of the thumb, not my setup, but theirs did. And it kicked those 500 and 550 grain arrows. It probably wouldn't have kicked my 860 though, And so there was a complete miss on a 180 class whitetail on the one, and on a 165 inch on the other one, it sent that arrow and it barely clipped him low back leg just a little bit, just like a flesh wound. Which the deer was unrecovered, but we gave him overnight, had a little bit of snow. He was on the doe the whole time. We jumped him the next day. We stayed on him for another day and found his shed, or Tanner did. So, that's another variable to consider. When you're on the ground, you don't have pre-cut lanes. You got this scenario right now and it's going down. And you know what? You don't want to have any fear in like driving that arrow through some grass, or, hey, on the 180, there was one weed, that's it. Boom. That's luckily that deer gave him another opportunity, but he sank himself in deep weeds and where there wasn't much of a shot, but with that arrow set up, it was a done deal with where he hit the animal. So,
yeah. I think, real quick, and then I'll let these guys, get some questions to you. But, when I was talking about like forgiveness and stuff and that long range practice, I'm not out there winging arrows at, 70, 80 yards at whitetails, but I like to practice that far to make those like 30 and, in shots feel so easy. But, you make a great point about, forgiveness. I try to set up something that's good for antelope, good for mule deer. When I go out west, yeah, man, sometimes I get those longer shots. But you make a great point about forgiveness with a whitetail in the way of, no matter which way that animal is facing, whether he's bedded, straight away, or he's bedded broadside or bedded quartering to, or he stands up and starts walking to you, you have the forgiveness and the confidence with your arrow setup. It doesn't matter. So that's forgiveness in itself. Like if you can aim your pin, or you don't have a pin, but aim your arrow at that deer, you can get the shot off, like with confidence that thing is going to pass through that entire animal. And that's such a huge advantage where, if you put me in there with, say, this, my mechanical setup, yeah, I got to be all of a sudden so picky and choosy with my angles. I could potentially miss out on, a good amount of opportunities that you would get. Maybe I could set up a little bit further away because I shoot a compound, and extend the range a little bit. But man, it's just a great point. And I think a lot to be said for whitetail hunting, because for most guys, me included, our whitetail shots are 25 and in, and even from up in a tree, and to be able to have that confidence in that arrow, like it doesn't matter which way he's facing. Like if he's quartering to me, I have the power to punch through.
Yeah.
Or if I'm on the ground and he sees me and he starts taking a few steps closer, I have that setup that can punch right through where, right now, unless I switch, like I have an arrow here, like I do have a fixed head setup that I use when I'm ground hunting. But sometimes I find myself, in a situation, I got my mechanical on and it's like, dang, I wish I had the fixed head on right now. And I got to wait for him to turn. And sometimes it doesn't happen, know?
Right.
So yeah, that's all really good stuff, man.
Yeah. And personally, I much prefer with shooting a good setup for that scenario of a quarter and two or a head on. I'd much rather take that shot than a broadside all day long, because the likelihood I'm going to kill that animal is higher, because you don't you don't deal with the no man's land as much, especially on the head on. There is no man's land unless your arrow on contact diverts and changes course. Like if you study how an animal drops, the no man's land is not an issue because they drop their front a lot more than their rear. So even if you hit them way high, it's going to come out low between the legs, so long as that arrow doesn't change its direction by hitting something, if that kind of makes sense. So it takes that factor out, which is generally the one that is hard to predict on a reacting animal, is that the no man's land, And then on quarter and two, that you can still get no man's land on quarter and two, but it's reduced. The likelihood is reduced. And, most of the time, those quarter and two shots like that, they're happening inside of 25 yards a lot of times. It's not generally 50 yards out there at quarter and two. So that's another thing to consider there, I guess. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, man, hey, Jared, I want to thank you, buddy. I'm going to let these guys get some questions, but it was good catching up. Yeah, buddy. Thank you for coming on, and we'll stay in touch, and make sure you get out in the woods this fall and don't kill yourself editing. We want to see you on the camera.
Hey guys, wanted to take a quick break and invite you to join the community over at HuntBetter. If you've ever wanted to learn from some of the best hunters in the country, but you're tired of searching for content all the time, head over to huntbetter.us and find all of our expert content in one place. We have original series like Breaking Down the Hunt, Master the Map, and hours of additional content and interviews. So be sure to check out huntbetter.us, check out our memberships, use code podcast30, all caps, and start learning from the best. Hope to see you there. Let's get back to the show. We got some cool questions coming in. Rich says, how often do you shoot your recurve? Also, what do you do to strengthen or increase your bow weight?
Well, I shoot a longbow, but recurve longbow, they're just a different feel. I shoot a lot. I shoot twice a week. I usually give it about 3 days break generally, and I'll shoot for about 3 hours. And there's a lot of arrows, a lot of arrows that get fired in that session. I have a pretty fast way about doing it. I won't say how many arrows, but it's a lot. And then there was another part of that question. I guess I can't exactly.
Yeah, he said, what do you do to, let me get back to it. What do you do to raise your, to strengthen or increase your bow weight? So I guess your draw weight.
Okay, so as strengthen like as an archer, right?
I guess so. Yeah, to be able to pull back more, or maybe just get the structure more firm.
Just through shooting. The only thing there's only two things I do with anything other than shooting the bow, and that is I'll hang from hanging bars, not even do pull-ups. Just I'll hang from hanging bars. Just work in the shoulders. It's really good. Anyways, even if you don't shoot, it's really good for your shoulders. I do know that. Otherwise, the only other thing that I do, and I don't know if it helped. I just started doing it probably 4 or 5 months ago, is I'll take lighter dumbbells, like 15s and 20s, and I'll hold them out here and keep that joint locked down for the bow arm and building joint strength right in there. And I'm not convinced it's really helping necessarily with that, but I have been doing that. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just shooting the bow, which if you shoot enough, you'll get the strength. But you don't want the bow to be more powerful than you. And for a lot of years, I would go to the field for surely overbowed because of penetration on the animal. I factored that. Yeah, I kind of factored that in, and I knew I was overbowed. It worked out pretty well for me. And you do give up some accuracy, but ideally where you want to be is you as the archer want to be more powerful than the bow, which is hard to put into words, but exactly what that means. But essentially, let's say you were shooting 60 pounds, if you can't shoot that with great ease, then try a 50. And if that's much easier, then that's probably the bow you should mainly run with. But I wouldn't discourage some shooting with the heavier bow because that'll make the 50 feel easier. So
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like some of those exercises are just more like maintenance. So it's not really building up. You're shooting the bow to build up strength, but then you're doing things like the dumbbell raises and the pull-up bar hangs to kind of maintain.
Well, I mean, the hanging is just because I care about my body overall. I know that's good for shoulders regardless of if I shot or not. It stretches out the body pretty good, not just the shoulders. So that's all I really do. And I'll twist around on there too and stuff, but I have no idea how many pull-ups I could actually do like in one set. I don't use it for pulling up. So when you're shooting the bow, it depends on your style of archery that you're pursuing. You know, you may be like most of what I end up training, they're going to be fast twitch muscles because I shoot a very fast, rapid draw and release. So, which is easier on the body, in my opinion. There's a lot of opinions on a lot of that stuff. So nobody can really concrete down some of those. They think they can, but I haven't seen any actual true. I've come across people that shoot light poundage. I shoot a lot and I shoot pretty heavy poundage and my shoulders feel great, given I do a lot of the hanging stuff, and that may help it. I'm very conscientious of keeping the joints locked in though. And that takes a lot of developing to get that. That's a long road to do that. But I think that's good for your shoulders. There's a lot of theories on different things. We could go down a very deep rabbit hole with all of that. So
yeah, I could tell you're like dancing around. Like, do they want me to go down this rabbit hole or not?
Yeah,
well, hey, what about this?
This could take me on a very long talk.
Yeah. What are some things that you are like? What's a practice routine look like for you? So when you're shooting all those arrows two times a week, what are you focusing on release? Are you kind of isolating things or?
Yes. I shoot at 5 yards all year long till it's getting close to hunting. But I have there's a lot of different styles of archery. There's a lot of different ways of archery. I don't believe that there's one that's the way. I really don't, because you have to define what you want to get out of the bow there's archers that shoot the bow just purely for freestyle. Just, they don't care what they hit. There's flight archers that only care about how far that arrow is going to go. There's heavy weight, they're just, how much can I pull? They don't care what they hit. So, that's the thing about archery is you as the archer have to define what you want to get out of it, which I did when I switched from compound to longbow. Now it's been a very long journey to maximize in all those areas. So for me, and what I do with that bow is I shoot it at 5 yards all year long. Until I'm getting closer to hunting. And then it looks ugly when I step to 10, 15, 20 yards. It looks ugly those first few sessions because the other part of the mind has to get a few sessions in before it begins to calculate and figure that out. I don't consciously do any aiming. I just let it do it. But I do all year long use the conscious to hyper train certain areas of the body to hand it to what they would call autopilot. That's just a subsystem within the subconscious, unconscious. That is the way that when you learn how to do something, that's the natural way that the mind operates. Like I learned how to tie my shoe. I had to think about it. Now it just does it. Right. And you can get to the point where that other part of the mind has control in the situation, but it does take a long time to get to that point. And when you shoot draw weight that's more powerful than you, then it begins to not control it as well. It's kind of hard to describe a lot of that. But that's what I do all year. I do use the conscious only to hyper train like some area of the body that I want tension in or relaxation in or whatever. And as soon as it's matured or getting close to matured, I let it go to the other part of the mind is what I do.
Yeah, man, what a cool answer. So, gosh, for the majority of the year, you're just focused on 5 yards.
Yep.
Really kind of just focused on form. If you could put it under one banner, it would be form.
Yeah, I identify it. This is going to sound a little out there. But if the bow is built right, so that means no matter the shooting style for the archer. So we know what that means for a compound in conscious control process shooting. We know a lot about how that bow should be built for that. So if the bow is built right for whatever style of archery, and the minds don't fight, which is the conscious doesn't try to take the task back, or vice versa when it's used to running with that, and the body is free from faults, then the arrow will hit the mark because the eye don't lie. I know that's a lot, but that's it, like in a nutshell. Absolutely true. I don't shoot an anchor point. I don't shoot. It doesn't matter if I'm down low or up high. I know this is more accurate, but it's pretty accurate in a lot of different ways. The reason that's true is because your eye never lies wherever it sees. Like I can look over here. I do see that. So if your body's in tune enough and it doesn't have any fault within it, well, then whatever the eye sees, the body's it doesn't matter if I'm down here. But that's a very long road. I mean, it takes 10 years to master jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, to be a black belt. I mean, it's 10 years. You're hyper training the body, So, I mean, it ain't, hey, I'm going to go shoot 50 arrows, a couple times a week and you're going to get it. Not with what I'm doing. This is other stuff, but doesn't mean that that's the only way. I don't like division, because division creates group identities, and then that gets really messy. So I think I like individuality a lot better.
Yeah, and what I've realized too is, just being super blessed to talk to incredibly successful hunters like you, like Andy. We have a buddy named Justin. I don't know if you know Justin Wright or not. He's an incredible hunter. He really excels in the hills. He excels everywhere, but he's just a master of the hills. And, I'm reaching out to these guys, pour into me, like teach me, and one thing with Justin, he will scout until he finds that hot sign. And I know this probably sounds like what everybody's like, oh yeah, why wouldn't you do that? But when you know Justin, like I know him, like that's the answer to every question I have. It's like, well, you need to get on the ground. You need to go find hot signs. Stop being lazy, And I'm like, I know, but is there another way? Because I've walked 7 miles, and have it. But he excels at that, and I think there's a part, like you take a part of it, then you take a little part of what Andy's naturally great at. You take a little part of what Jared's really good at, and then you ask yourself, hey, what keeps me excited about being in the woods and chasing critters, Right. And then find that natural lean. I think that's kind of what I'm learning in my career as a hunter right now. It's just, hey, find what comes natural to you and then run full force at that, but still be picking and learning and from other people.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Cause now you're gathering information. Oh, I like this style, what this guy did over here and that guy, and gives you some creative ideas and whatnot, but then dig deep within your own system, whatever it is, your hunt style, your archery, whatever, and I mean, there's no doubt about I would never turn Chansey and Tanner into conscious control process shooters for mature whitetails inside of 40 yards on the ground. No way. I'd much rather have run on the other subsystem, the other side of the mind, 100%. Cause I've been down the road, I've seen, that's why I switched to a longbow and other things, that I knew I'd never be able to quite maximize myself with a compound in those situations. And that's not to degrade the compound. I love compounds, and I love snap shooting too. I love it all, but yeah, my deepest love is what I'm pursuing with it. Which that's a long road.
Dude, I love it. I want to hear more. I may get with you after the show here. I want to know more about the Native American thing.
Yeah.
Dude, I grew up, we'll get to another question here in a second, but I grew up, I think it was probably the first grade, and my mom and dad got me this pair of moccasins. Like I wore them to school. I thought they made me run faster. I loved being in the woods. And dude, apparently I was telling everybody in my class that I was Native American. Like legit, I'm Native American. My family, is Native American. And somehow I got around, and my mom and dad, this is one of those moments in life that you like vividly remember, when you're little. And I remember them sitting me down and they're like, bro, you're not Native American in any kind of way. And it was heartbreaking. But my wife now she has Native American in her family for real. And so kind of now it's like, hey, joke's on you guys, because my kids have taken over with it. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I have a love for it.
That's the interesting thing is, you want to talk a little bit about archery, the 400-year gap of guns. You study any of those archery cultures before that era, they were all instinctual, more using that other part of the mind, because in the battle or survival or even, getting their game, they didn't, they relied on a lot more than just accuracy to do it. From what I've gathered anyways. So, but here again, if I was going to go shoot target archery, well, hell yeah, give me a light bulb conscious control process shooting, because accuracy is the only thing I'm trying to maximize, right? Accuracy. And I treat range as a cousin of, it's a separate entity, range is, but I treat it as a cousin, because there is, obviously the more accurate you are, the longer range you can shoot. But then you got variables of wind and crosswinds and different things. So range does have to be separated, for a number of reasons. But if that's all I need, that's why it's like, you got to define what am I trying to get out of this bow?
Yeah. Oh man, Jared,
we're gonna care what anybody else thinks. Like you define what it is you want to pursue and get out of that, then figure out what's the best style out there. And if there isn't one, develop one.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh man, we're so going to nerd out after this. I want to pick your brain so bad about some stuff. All right, cool. Let's, we're getting close on time here. So we're going to get to these questions here. Yeah. Evan says, do you prefer the deer to stand before shooting, or will you shoot a bedded deer so long as it's the right angle?
Yeah, that's, every situation's different, but what I will say is, in my opinion, if you're shooting a good arrow setup, you're safer to shoot them while they're bedded, from what I've seen. Only because if you're on the ground with them and they stand, you're probably already, I'm guessing, pretty tight on them in those scenarios. So let's factor that in there. You're probably inside of 20 or floating right around there. Anything beyond that, every situation's different. If you got plenty of cover and you think this animal's going to stand up and never detect you, then you maybe want to consider, that's where it gets hard to define, you're inside of 10 on them. It's like, yeah, I would say take the shot bedded if you got a good setup. Because you're not going to have the reaction. It's very controlled in that case because they're bedded. They're not going to be sitting there high intensity while they're bedded. I think it's a safer bet, if you're tighter on them, just because of those variables.
I never thought about reaction time being slower when they're bedded.
Inside of 20, there's not really going to be, from what I've seen, granted. We haven't shot a lot of them bedded, so my sample size of that is very, not that large, but I haven't seen, a head twitch, sure, but not a full-fledged giant massive movement. I've seen them drop at 26 yards, the arrows halfway to them out of a 70-pound compound, and they still get 10 inches of drop.
Yeah.
That's where it's like, okay, all right. I can't be a precision shooter on a situation. You know what I mean? Like I gotta, I think it's always best to try to be as accurate as you can, but smart to factor other things in.
Hey, if you haven't checked out what Jared and the Whitetail Adrenaline crew have going on, you definitely need to head over to their website, whitetailadrenaline.com. You can support all they're doing by picking up a few DVDs, and I promise you it will be some of the most entertaining hunts you've ever seen in your entire life. And I truly believe Jared and the guys over there have some of the most incredible footage ever captured while hunting whitetails. And on top of that, if you're paying attention, you'll learn some super valuable things along the way. Just loads of wisdom and knowledge right at your fingertips in every film they release. So head on over to whitetailadrenaline.com. I don't get a dime for saying any of this. I just love those guys, and they've been incredible friends to Hunt Better since the beginning. So head on over there and support those guys. Pick up a few DVDs, a sweatshirt, a t-shirt, and let them know how much you appreciate all that they're doing. Let's get back to the show. Okay, here's a great question. Do you recommend any specific ancient or Native American readings on trad hunting?
On the actual hunting, some of the ones with like Saxon Pope and Art Young and with Ishii, those are pretty, and Will Compton joined them guys on quite a few hunts. A lot of people are familiar with Hunting the Hard Way with Howard Hill. That's, Howard Hill, he's a very controversial archer. But, because he did coin his own self the greatest archer that ever lived, which that's a pretty bold statement. But as far as in terms of the last century, in my opinion, he's got that's a great book. It's a great read. When I take a look at what he did with a bow is he was very accurate. Sure, there's certain archers today that are more accurate on the range, say, but he was very accurate, had really good range, had really good power of the bow, which obviously then transfers to the arrow. He had pretty good versatility with his body, and he had pretty good speed of executing that shot. He never talked about those, but those are my 5 pillars that I'm always chasing. And to be good in any one of those and just that one is easy, but to be good in all 5 in the same shot, that's difficult. That's challenging to do. And then he got good in all of those. I don't think I've never read anything where he broke it down and defined it like that, but he was good in those 5 areas. And then he took it into real world application on animals. And obviously if you do that, he shot hundreds of big game animals and thousands of birds of the sky. Those are situations you're going to have, intense situations. You're going to be, some of those animals, that he killed were, they could have killed him. And I'm not saying, over here in you can't compare target archery to that. That target archery, you almost gotta, and I don't like, that's a totally different deal. They don't measure force of the arrow. They don't measure versatility with the body. They don't measure speed of how fast you drew and fired that shot. And all those things, they matter in intense situations. So they measure archery by accuracy and range. That's a great book. And the ones from Saxon Pope and Art Young, where they, and Ishii, there's stories with Ishii and how, a lot of people don't know that Ishii's, the last Native American of 1911, last wild Native American of 1911, Saxon Pope. That's how he met him. He ended up being his doctor. Saxon Pope worked at the university in San Francisco, and Ishii's the one that introduced him to archery. And then Art Young come along, and Saxon Pope and Art Young were friends, I believe, from my memory. They were friends before that, but Saxon Pope wanted to bring Art in, and that's where they got going. Now they took more of the Ishii. He had his own methods, but they took more of the English. Saxon Pope and Art Young, they took more of the English ways. But anyways, there's a lot of good stories in those types of books. So.
Love it, man. From Jared Scheffler, the scholar. I love it. That's another comment. I'm all about
a high school education, So.
Hey, man, it doesn't matter. I love this. That's what all of HuntBetter is created around, is just this idea to learn, this philosophy of, hey, no matter what you accomplished, keep learning, keep pouring into yourself. And you're obviously doing that. It's just really cool, man.
Yeah. One thing I would say to that is, once you've learned a decent amount, hand it over to the instincts.
Yeah, man.
Because when I talked about that, what I kind of wrapped up in archery there, the fight of the minds, I've seen that many times. You get enough experience, you consciously absorbing all this information, but then you go out and you apply it, and that other part of the mind gets stronger and more powerful, and it tells you to do that, and then your conscious comes. That's the fight of the minds. And so many times your instincts tell you what to do, and I've seen this. Your instincts tell you what to do, and then you sit around for a minute and your conscious talks you out of that. That's a fight of calculations of what to do. I say it's a fight of calculations with the bow, but that's a fight of calculations in the hunt. And I've seen that many times. My instincts told me to do this. Oh, are you sure? Or I've been with another really good hunter, and then it's like, what do you think? Well, I'm thinking this, and it's like, don't let that, once you got enough experience, don't let your conscious talk you out of your instincts are more right the more you do something.
Yeah. And I think that's the key is the reps you put in, like what you said earlier. I can't go out and shoot my trad bow 50 shots and go, hey, I think I got what Jared was talking about. I think I got it down. Like it's going to take the reps and the dedication and the hard work. But then there's that gray area of where you do kind of let your instinct take over. I mean, I've played guitar since I was 6 years old. And when people ask me certain things or why I do certain things now, it's hard to give an answer because you're like, I don't know how to explain that. I'm not telling my hand to go here at this time. It's just total. I guess muscle memory is a word that can be thrown around, but
I get what you're saying. I don't like to use that word because it's way more way more deeper than that. But yeah, you may have to use the conscious for a little bit, learning how to play the guitar. But after you recognize, I don't have a fault, now you hand it to the other mind, and now you get fluidity with it, and you get
that's a good word,
right?
Right.
You can't get absolute highest level of. There's hardly any fluidity within the conscious mind if you're trying to execute. Just consciously try to think about walking. It's awkward for me to watch somebody do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no fluidity. There's no grace with it, or conscious. Like once you learn how to ride the bike, you let it take over. And as I mentioned, I do use the conscious to hyper train certain areas of the body that I detect, there's a fault here within it. And then once it's matured enough, then I hand it over. I don't just shoot a whole lot. I did for a while, tried to figure out some things, and I killed quite a few bucks, and it worked out pretty good. But I never quite got where I wanted to go with it, and I'm always chasing. I got things. Few years, you know what I mean? I'm on a journey here. So
yeah, man, I love it. Okay, we'll try to get through these last few here. Yeah. This is great, you guys. Some of our team members have sent some in. We'll answer these real quick. Do you see more people traveling out west to try to mimic the strategy of the DVDs, and has it made it harder?
I absolutely have seen a giant increase in that, or much bigger than it was even probably 5 years ago. Has it made it harder? Well, the last 3 seasons, which are not out yet, those are our best that we've had. I did scale back on filming gun last year, but so the project would get smaller, so I don't have to take. But the next 2 seasons that come out are the best seasons we've ever had. It's uncuffed, but on the public land side, it's the best 2 back-to-back public land seasons. And we're pushing the threshold on, like, there's a couple other videos. Obviously, there's certain storylines, that happened, like Chancey's canoe hunt from a couple of years. There's certain storyline. You're never going to quite duplicate that, but you might have one happen over here that's just as good in a whole different way. But I'm saying as a whole, those are the 2 most action-packed, the next 2 coming out. And the one we filmed last year is, in my opinion, the best boa season we've ever had. So
awesome, man. But
we've gotten a lot more adaptable, and that's just part of doing it. You do it for, since 2010, 100% on the ground chasing these animals. Plus, I was doing it since I was a kid, to some degree, and quite a bit in that 06. 07, 08, I did it a lot in them. earlier too. So that just makes sense. I mean, the caliber, all of that, just you just get more and more experience, and then you trust your instincts more, and then it's you're just adapting with that influx of pressure in ways that I can't even really explain. Probably, just it probably is recognizing pockets better and places that people are overlooking, or timing things a little bit better in some ways. I mean, there's no really,
Yeah, there's no, it's hard to give a tip there. You can maybe give suggestions. That's a really good way to explain the situational thing. I mean, that's what everybody hears me say this all the time. Andy tells me that all the time. It drives me nuts sometimes because, we want a straightforward answer, but I mean,
yeah,
you totally get it. You hear him saying it. You hear Justin, I was talking about earlier, say it. You're saying it, but it's one of those things where there's no step 1, 2, or 3 to finding a new pocket to go run into. If you find a spot that's kind of taken over, it has to be your gut. There's no way to explain how to do that.
Right. I agree 100% on that. You do the same thing for 10, 15 years. People that are listening now and they don't get that I call it instinctual hunting, because you begin to trust that other part of the mind. You're not even looking, at exactly what the weather's going to be. You're not I mean, a lot of people know that. I mean, we're not running cameras. We're not pre-scouting. And I'm not saying not to do any of that. I'm just telling you what we haven't done since I haven't ran cameras since before I started the videos. So I think I gave them away in 05 or 06, the couple of 35 millimeters I had.
Yeah.
And I did 1 day of pre-scouting in 2008, and that's it. As far as like spring scouting, I mean, in the summer, there was a day or two way back in like 2010. It's like we'd go shining or go look at bucks. But other than that, it's like I don't even entertain it till it's hunt time. I'm not saying that any of that can't help in certain ways either. I mean, everybody's got to find their niche thing that works for them. But we do rely very heavily on our instincts for decision making. When I say we, obviously the cumulative group within Whitetail Adrenaline. But yeah, people think that we're sitting around at night strategizing tomorrow, overly strategic. It's not a lot of that. Now, back in the days when we were more learning certain things, whatever it might be, yeah, you're consciously learning and taking in this, information. But I don't like to overly think everything. I like to go into the next day and see where the instincts, that part of the mind takes me, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm somebody who can really, if I have too much information, I love to learn. But there are times where I can, we talked about this a few shows back. You can, down here in the South, you can walk through the big woods and you can have a plan all day long and it'll eat you right up, Yeah. And you have to be, I'm learning that. So I'm not saying this like I got it figured out, but I'm learning that you got to go in there. Yeah, it's okay to go in with a plan, but you've got to be able to adapt. And so this has been good for me just hearing that.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, sometimes sure, we'll make a small plan like, we're going to start here in the morning or whatever. We might make a mini plan, but we're not sitting around for an hour discussing it or even thinking about, I think we're better I think the other part of the mind, when that day and moments come, it's not a battle of the minds anymore because you had this dedicated giant plan in your head. So then your adaptability is going to increase, if that kind of makes sense. Because you have no plan that you've set, like committed to, like, well, I got to get there. This is where I had my heart set on. It's like, there's a big buck 400 yards over there. I think I can head him off, but I got 5 minutes to do it and I got to be here, just going with it. And 9 times out of 10, that might not work, but 1 out of 10, it does. And when it does, it's like, wow, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty good odds in the deer woods too. I think it was the hunting public talking about, I think when maybe they switched over to the saddles, about how much more this was several years ago, but how much more liberated they felt because they're not walking in, a mile and a half with a tree stand, and all of a sudden you feel like you have to climb because I brought my tree stand with me. So you're like, these guardrails of your plan are just, messing you up and not allowing you to be instinctual and do what your gut is telling you to do.
Yeah. I mean, I don't run a lot of stuff. It's like when I'm out there, it's my binoculars, bow, arrow, broadhead, not much else. You got to be careful. Otherwise you begin to create limit, for me anyways. I have great freedom of keeping my feet on the ground and the adaptability and all of that. And I'm not saying there's a lot of good, I believe there'd be a lot of good hybrid situations too. I'm out there on the ground covering ground, but it's easy for me to cause I'm covering so much ground to identify, boy, if I was a tree stand or saddle guy, boom. Now I maybe never would have found that pocket, but I can identify like, ooh, this isn't maybe built right for still hunting through right here, but that's a good, you could develop a hybrid for yourself,
Yeah.
Here again, there's no creating division here, that's the one thing. It's like, if you want to hunt out a tree, like, they're great too. I mean, you can't say they're not. I mean, look at how many, big whitetails have, been taken that way, or, it's all situational based. That's why there's no one way to archery that's 100% the best way in all scenarios and situations. There just isn't. And in my opinion, anybody that would say that either isn't experienced enough to know the other forms of archery or is just lying. So, that, whether it's hunting or archery or whatever, I mean, you have to decide what's going to work for you and then maximize yourself within that space.
Yep. Are you a Bruce Lee fan at all?
I do study Bruce Lee some. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I grew up obsessed with Bruce Lee, and he develops this Jeet Kune Do style where basically exactly what we're talking about, picking the best parts. Somebody asked him.
That might be where I came up with, or, where the maximize everything's been said out there. There's a lot of really good ones, like his be formless, be water.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great one too.
But it's like what you said, it's not just with hunting or, shooting your trad bow. Like it's with everything. And when you can stop thinking through one little lens of, what you see on the hunting channel, you really start kind of broadening your way of thinking through things. And then the way you approach them, Bruce, somebody asked him, what's your style of fighting? And he's like, I don't have a style of fighting. He's like, I don't have a Chinese way of, he's like, I don't have a Chinese way of fighting or a Japanese way of fighting. He said, but basically with Jeet Kune Do, he just took these little things from each, from boxing, from Kung Fu, from, whatever it might be. And he put those into one style. And like, that's, something I studied so much when I was younger. And it's kind of stuck with me, but I see that so much with guys like you, guys like Andy, so many other guys, the THP guys, that they're taking so many of these different styles and taking what works for them. Not so much what's the best, but hey, what's good? And then what comes naturally to me.
Yeah. And then, this scenario, I have to do this, but the next scenario, that might not work, and you're just adaptable. There's definitely a correlation there, but I mean, what you're talking about there is individuality though, really. Like, when you said the get outside of the lens here, it's like, well, if you're part of a group identity, that's why I don't like group identities. Any of them is you're going to be in the lens. And then you're going to be, I heard it when I launched the public land series. Oh, you'll never be able to do that every year. I didn't know if I'd be able to do it every year and have enough. And I really didn't, but I didn't listen to them. And I also didn't do it to prove something to them either. I did it because I wanted to.
Yeah.
But then when we did the all ground stuff, and we had ground stuff from the very get-go, set on the first video. But when I went all on the ground in 2010 and started ramping up immediately, like the content, I'd play it on the TV at the shows, and people constantly would, oh, you could never do that in this state or that, or whatever. I'd never say anything like, well, all right, well, whatever. Okay, I guess maybe not, it's like, it's not true, but I mean, that was how mentality was, but it shifted so much. It's been years since I've even heard of that. I can't remember what year it was. I think it was around 2010 or 11, just for the heck of it. I think I YouTubed it, stalking a whitetail. And I found one. I'm not going to say who it was, but it was most definitely in a high fence. But it's not a name within the hunting industry. It's a name that people would know, though. But I was like, whoa, I believe it was after the 2010 season. I was like, I wonder, just curiosity, if there's very much ground hunting out there, and come to find out, I never grew up watching Dan Fitzgerald stuff, but Tanner, who's now part of the team crew, he filled me in on that. Dan Fitzgerald was doing a lot of wild stuff back in like the 80s and 90s, which I was surprised that I watched quite a few videos that my dad would rent from the movie store or whatever, but I don't remember ever watching the Fitzgerald stuff. But yeah, I think the individual has to set out what they want to do and not worry about what other people think. People seeing me shoot a bow, they'd probably be like, that's not the way you do it. Well, it works really good for me.
Yeah.
Really good. So, anyways, but that goes just like anything. That's what you're defining, what you want to get out of the bow, define what you want to get out of this life, define what you want to get out of the business or what you're pursuing or whatever it might be. Define that and then be like, yeah, that's what I want. That's what I need. In my case with the bow, I knew I was going to need some of those things if I was going to, keep hunting deer on the ground, which it was addictive for me. Like it's like a drug, right?
Yeah. And I think, I would love to be in the room when somebody told you that, but you know what? I think knowing you a little bit now, I think you would say, hey, you know what? Yeah, there probably is some things I could work on.
Oh, yeah, no, there's plenty.
I think you'd be totally sincere.
I don't have to look to anybody else to be like, are they doing it better than me or whatever? Yeah. It's like, here's where I'm at. I don't even know what it's like out there. Like, I don't search it out. I don't seek it out. It's like, okay, these are a lot of things that I made mistakes. I had a couple stalks last year. I made micro mistakes on that. I should have known better, than to make those. They were very small and they were very difficult stalks, but it cost me, and it's like, I don't have to look to somebody else. You know what I mean? Like I got enough over here. So
I love it. Man, this has just been so refreshing talking to you. And man, we're like becoming the old guys now, and we're living in this time where, you and I remember what it was like to not have a computer, to not have internet, to what is email, but now, you can turn your phone on and figure everything out almost, or at least get answers to everything, when a lot of times you just had to be in the field and figure it out. Right. And I think that's probably a better answer to a lot of questions these days, is to get out there, put the time in on your boots and figure it out. And then come up with your own solution, because maybe you're going to come up with something I didn't come up with.
I love that, like that woodsmanship, because that has, I do agree that's got to be preserved. It's like that's a very broad aspect, but a lot of times when the word woodsmanship drops, a lot of times I think on recovering an animal that something went wrong on. That's where I start, which now you got, my buddy Mike, he does drone deer recovery, right? So, it helps recover those animals, or the dogs, but sometimes you can't get, there's only so much, time. They got other track jobs, and sometimes you got to make the right decision. Like, am I going to push this animal, depending on that hit, or am I going to let him sit, or let him sit how long, or overnight, or that's some of that woodsmanship there. Obviously woodsmanship just is a very broad thing, but we'll lose it if we don't pass some of that down. And if you don't put yourself in situations where just certain situations, it's going to get lost. It's kind of like old forms of archery got lost. They got lost through the 400-year gun gap, and they haven't really been maximized and rediscovered since. So it got lost, and I know that it got lost. That's an example right there. That's long before, technology and social media and all of that.
Yeah, it's almost like this this desire to not struggle, and this desire to go into something and not know all of the answers. Maybe you don't really know it, but Google makes it pretty easy to quote unquote know things. But when you avoid the struggle, that kind of hurts this effort in preserving the culture of hunting, because that's how we all figured it out.
Right.
And it's so important. When Andy and I were talking about Hunt Better, we started feeling like this responsibility. It's like, we got to do something. We're not going to change everybody's minds. We're not trying to change the world, but like, we got to go, hey, these, if you want to use trail cameras or cell cameras and have every hunting app on your phone and do that. Like, if it gets you outdoors and you're having fun, man, and you're doing things legally, hey, more power to you. Right. But let's not forget our roots as hunters. Let's not forget that culture that we have. And it's so important, man.
Absolutely. No, I love it. I love what you guys are doing there, because for all the things that we just described. And two, you brought up Google. It's all at your fingertips. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot a person can learn, but I think ultimately the individual has to follow, do I believe this or that? Because you get so much information. Everybody's an overnight expert. Everything's, like real quick to speak experience when they've only done this for a year or two or whatever. And you got to be careful with that. Otherwise you don't have to be overly careful. Just follow your instincts probably on it, but great stuff, man. I love your heart for just hunting as it is. Not this sport necessarily that this modern sport of hunting, but just the life of a hunter, the culture of hunting. You're like exhibit A of what Hunt Better is all about. So, dude, thanks for doing this, man. Like, you've given us so much time. Yeah. Thank you guys for having me on. Hey guys, thanks again for listening to the Hunt Better podcast. Be sure to check out whitetailadrenaline.com and support those guys. And also consider joining the Hunt Better community over at huntbetter.us. Use the code podcast30, all caps, and save 30% off any membership. We'd love to have you. As always, remember to hunt harder, hunt smarter. We'll see you next week.